It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Kyle Benedict as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. So good of you to join us today. We are doing part 2 of our history of the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office with Brendan Fillingham and Ron Williams. Welcome back.
Nice to be here.
Really left anywhere. But anyways, we're going to continue on. Now, the first part of the show, we talked 1864 up to kind of 1911. And I guess the point we want to make to folks, too, is that all the stuff we're talking about today is going to be available at the Charlotte Hall Museum next year in March in 2015. And then there's also tours of the Sheriff's Office. If they get a hold of Brendan, it's possible to get a tour.
Right. So we also have an upcoming firearms exposition at Charlotte Hall Museum on January 2nd.
Okay.
Where we're going to be having the drawing for a commemorative Sheriff's Office 1911 pistol. And we're going to have a lot of firearms from our Sheriff's Office collection as well as Charlotte Hall's. Okay. So it's going to be quite a few firearms and it'll be quite an interesting all-day event.
I bet. Just to look at the differences and the changes that have occurred over the years. Okay, so we kind of left off. We didn't really get up to 1911, but 1911, and now, Brendan, you said you really would like to start off part 2 of this show with Grover Sexton.
Right. Grover Sexton he started out his career, I believe it was at Wright Field in Ohio, and he was helping to design aircraft engines in the early to mid 1910s. Okay. And during World War I, he was a military police officer. I believe he was in Europe and so forth. After World War I, up until the 1920s, he was working for Studebaker Company. And Studebaker found out that 10 out of 12 sheriffs in Arizona by 1925 were all using the Studebaker Big Six. And I believe there's a picture that they're probably showing right now of Deputy Grover Sexton in front of the Studebaker Big Six patrol car, which we believe is downtown Prescott that he's in.
It appeared to be. Yeah, it looks like it. Yeah.
And so Studebaker said, okay, 10 out of 12 sheriffs in Arizona are all driving the Studebaker Big Six. Would you please go down to Arizona and find out why they're doing that? Because this is a big deal for us.
That was going to be my next question.
Right.
So why? Why?
Right. So Grover Sexton gets down to Yavapai County, and he comes in and talks to the sheriff at that time, is Ed Weil, who just won an election against Sheriff George Ruffner, and Sheriff Weil's specialty is, of course, this is the 1920s, so this is Prohibition. And he says, okay, Sheriff, what are we going to do? And he says, well, you've got your Big Six here. Why don't we take it and do, Prohibition, liquor enforcement? So they take that vehicle, and they run all over the county with it, through rivers, chasing ridge runners. They're chasing homicide suspects. And there's also a picture, I believe, that's on now showing some of the stills. It's a 1928 picture, but it gives you an idea of what significant.
And you have to understand, at the time, the roads in northern Arizona and specifically Yavapai County were 2 tracks half the time.
I was going to say, yeah, there's no pavement out there.
There's very little pavement. A lot of them are a little more than washes, and the Big Six, because with its wheelbase and its high clearance, was able to really take these roads on.
It's like a tank out there.
Exactly. Up these roads, down these ravines. And it was a very reliable, almost like an all-terrain vehicle in some respects, even though it wasn't. And that's why so many of the sheriffs out here in Arizona use them. And that's what Grover discovered, is that these vehicles work well in the non-roads of Arizona.
I'll be darned.
So Grover was actually deputized by Sheriff Weil.
Oh, right there on the spot.
Yes. He was. Well, back then it was raise your right hand and do you solemnly swear. And so he was deputized.
Okay.
Some of the photos you've seen where he has his badge on, he's next to the marked patrol car. So he's deputized. He works for about a year with us, and about a year and a half ago, the sheriff's office was contacted by an individual back east who said, "Hey, I bought an estate sale. I was in an estate sale, and I bought a .30-30 rifle. The rifle on the butt of it says Grover Sexton Deputy Sheriff, Prescott, Arizona.
Oh, man.
Does that mean anything to you guys?
Look at that.
And we said, well, yes, we do. So we acquired that rifle. So we have Grover Sexton's 30-30 rifle that it's an 1894 Winchester that he used back in 1925.
So how he was here for a year?
Yes.
What happened to him afterwards?
Well, he was here during Sheriff Wheel's administration, and then he lost an election to Sheriff Ruffner again. Or not again, but for the first time.
Okay,
but,
so they switched places
right,
again.
they switched places. So after Grover was here with us in Yavapai County, he became a deputy in Cochise County for a short time.
Okay.
But then he reported back to Studebaker, and he says, this vehicle here, the Big Six, goes places where horses won't go. And the sheriffs in Arizona love it. And so Studebaker Company said, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. In large part to your service in Yavapai County in Arizona, we're going to rename the Studebaker Big Six the Studebaker Sheriff.
They renamed it
based on that.
They renamed it the Sheriff model based on his experiences with Yavapai County and the other counties in Arizona.
Now, do we know, did that make the Studebaker car spread out through all law enforcement across the country?
I think it
Probably helped.
It definitely helped. And even after Grover left Yavapai County, even into Sheriff Ruffner's administration, he was still a special deputy for Yavapai County, and he would drive the country all over the nation looking for Yavapai County homicide suspects. So he would be in the newspaper, they'd pull him to Selma, Alabama, and it would be in the paper and say, well, this Grover Sexton of Deputy Sheriff for Yavapai County is here, and he's talking to the Chief of Police at Selma, and he's brought the Studebaker Big Six Sheriff with him. And, you know, it's great. And he's going to talk to everybody and see where these guys are. And he calls it, Grover always called the Studebaker Sheriff the Thunder Pumper.
The Thunder Pumper.
Right. And Grover Sexton actually also wrote a book about his experiences.
Wow, he did a lot in a year.
He did. He wrote a 46-page little book with photographic illustrations and photographs of his experiences. And Studebaker made that book available at all their dealerships.
Right.
And you could also write to the corporation and get a copy of that book.
Oh, man. So, wow. I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. It's such a long time ago. And what kind of population were we talking about in Yavapai County maybe around that time?
25,000?
No, I think 10 to 15,000 in the mid-1920s. And you think Prescott is quite a bit smaller. The Miller Valley area at that time was still dairy farms.
So like one of our main cities right now in Yavapai County was the population.
The population of the entire county. Prescott may have been 5,000 people.
Wow, that is just amazing. And then to cover all that land too. All right, let's take a break, okay? Brendan filling in studio today along with Ron Williams with the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. We're talking about Yavapai County Sheriff's Office history. Stick around, countywide, back in just a couple minutes.
What do you think it would be like to teach? Chances are, you have no idea. Teachers today are breaking down obstacles, finding innovative ways to instill old lessons, proving that greatness can be found in everyday places, and that you don't need to be famous to be unforgettable. That's what it's like to teach.
If you store your guns properly.
So not just anyone can get to them.
I'll feel safer when I'm playing outside.
Safer when walking home.
I won't have to tell so many family members. I'm sorry.
I won't hear as many scary stories.
Or scary news reports.
I won't have to hold someone's hand and shout you're gonna make it.
And I won't have to tell my kids this isn't a drill.
Please.
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 Do it for us.
For us. Do it for us.
Your family, friends, and neighbors are all counting on you. Never let your gun get into the wrong hands. If you own a firearm and are not using it, please be responsible and be sure that it's stored in a safe place. Remember, always, lock it up. For more information on firearm storage safety, visit ncpc.org.
Every day across America, excess food is gathered by a network of good people at local food banks, giving hope to millions of children who struggle with hunger. They've earned their wings, and you can too. Together, we can solve child hunger. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Welcome back to Countywide. We're talking about the history of the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office with Brendan Fillingham and Ron Williams. There's going to be a display in March of 2015, at least it starts in March, with all the memorabilia that you guys have gathered over the years here. And then there's tours available at the Sheriff's Office, too. If you give Brendan a call there at the Sheriff's Office, he might be able to get in there to give you a tour. Now, we talked Grover Sexton. You wanted to talk Willis Butler. Tell me about Willis Butler.
Well, Willis Butler was our sheriff from 1941 to the last day of 1946. And Willis Butler, he was originally from Greer area, and his was a ranching family, and then he became a missionary. And he was a deputy sheriff for 2 years here in the Clarkdale area.
Okay.
And he was elected in 1940 and defeated Ruffner's successor, Robert M. Robbins.
Okay.
And so Willis Butler, at the time he was elected sheriff, was 29 years old. The youngest sheriff in Arizona state history, and one of the youngest, if not the youngest, in the nation.
Oh, wow, okay.
And so he came in, and of course the war was getting started and so forth. But he was the first sheriff to make use of public safety radio.
Okay.
And so by December of 1940, we were using AM radio. It had just come into the sheriff's office under the call letters KQHM. And so there's a great picture of Sheriff Butler.
It's up.
And Deputy Sheriff Buck Jones is operating the radio set. And what would happen is the sheriff's radio set was in his actual office. And so either he would broadcast himself or one of the deputies would. And so he would get on there and say, okay, this is Yavapai 1. I need Yavapai 27 to go out to the ranch there at Clarkdale, and there's a fight going on.
Dispatch begins.
Right. And so if you were in Prescott, you could actually go to a call box.
Mm-hmm.
It'd light up, and you'd say, "Yes, sir, I'm on my way."
So this is AM radio. This was
Right.
not two-way radio.
Right.
This is one-way AM radio, like you would tune into your sports news or whatever
So
else.
I'd be listening all the time.
Yeah, you'd have your AM radio tuned to
KQHM.
KQHM, and you'd hear the sheriff would come over and tell you your call. And then you'd have to go to the call box, and I got it, sir, thank you. And then you'd go to do your call.
Oh, gosh, I wonder how much time you had to respond back.
That I don't know.
You know?
Well, as quickly as possible. I mean,
right.
If it's a what we call a code 3 call, you have to get to the phone and tell the sheriff you're on your way, or else the sheriff will have to ride out himself.
So dispatch, this is initial bit
Right.
dispatch,
Yes.
correct?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because prior to that, I mean, for the most part, the local deputies, you'd have one deputy for a community usually, and people would just go to his house.
Sure.
Or call him directly and say, hey, Bob, there's a problem down at the bar. And, Bob would have to go down there and deal with it.
The equivalent of 911 back then.
Exactly.
Yeah, except it could be a knock at your door while you're having dinner.
Exactly.
And somebody's
because
out there.
there were resident deputies. Usually you only had one for a community, one for Baghdad or one for Yarnell or one for Ash Fork. And he was the resident deputy of that community. He was the sheriff for that community, essentially.
Oh, that is amazing. Now, we talked about, that was a really great story, too, about kind of the start of dispatch right there. But before the show started, we were talking about kind of how, okay, we may be a little advanced in the dispatch realm, but some of the other parts of just being a Yavapai County Sheriff's Office deputy that you see today, those things took a long time before they got to us.
Right, they sure did. And, Arizona of the 1940s was very distant, population was still low, and the sheriffs did not really work together. And so one of the things that Sheriff Butler did is, because he was a rancher, he got the sheriffs all together of the entire state and had them ranching, and roping and riding, and they would rodeo. And so Butler got to know all of them, and he said, okay, what we need to do here is we need to start working together. And we need to be a unified law enforcement for the state.
Wow.
And so he started the Arizona Sheriff's Association.
Okay, I was going to ask if that's what happened there.
Right, and so there was already a county attorneys association, so he started the Sheriff's Association and was able to bring them together. And so he was
share ideas.
Right. And he was also a pioneer in allowing deputies to cross county lines. Because prior to the 40s, a deputy sheriff only had county jurisdiction. So if something crossed the county line, he was out of luck.
Okay.
And so Willis Butler said, okay, I'm going to deputize the sheriffs, and they can deputize. So when persons of interest in criminal offenses cross county lines, the deputy can cross right along with them.
He's been cross-certified, essentially.
Right. So he spearheaded quite a few things here in the state.
Right.
And like we had mentioned earlier, a lot of things, I mean, up until in the 40s and in the 30s and even in the 50s, deputies wore their street clothes. There was no uniform. There was no marked patrol cars. A deputy drove his own vehicle and was paid mileage. A deputy wore whatever he wore on a normal daily basis, and that was his uniform. I mean, you were issued a badge if it was late enough. But in the early days, the deputy had to provide his own badge.
Oh wow!
So you look at some other badges from like the 20s and even the 30s, and we have a wide variety.
Do we have
badges.
some of those?
We do.
Oh wow!
A wide variety of styles of badges. Some of them look like they came out of Cracker Jack boxes, and you could get them at a dime store.
What are they made out of? Most of them.
Well, they're all metal, but whether they're tin or really
they could be a 6-point star, 5-point star. It could be a shield. And so it wasn't until 1947 did we really have a standard badge design.
Okay.
Grover Sexton, of course, he wore the first mass issue badge of the sheriff's office. But then successive sheriffs Butler designed his own badge. But then when Willis Butler's successor, Orville Bozarth, came in 1947, he put in a 6-point star, which is about the standard design up until the 1990s. And then we just put a circle around it.
And it wasn't until 1963 with Sheriff Al Ayers that we actually really start to join the modern era, where he determined that the deputies are going to have uniforms.
1963.
63.
Doesn't seem like it's all that long ago.
It wasn't.
No, and that was also the first time they did a mass issue purchase of patrol cars, because prior to 1963, your personal vehicle was your patrol car. The county could not afford to purchase patrol cars for its deputies. So they would say, okay, for example, if you were Deputy Sheriff Gil Gilpin of Paulden, he would purchase his own vehicle and put lights in it, a siren and a radio, and that's what he drove home to the grocery store, and then he would rush out on calls at night too, or during the day.
What were these guys paid?
Not a lot.
It did not pay to be a Yavapai County deputy.
It sounded like you had to shell out quite a bit of money just to become this.
Or you had to have some sort of side job, and so then, but it was difficult because, for example, Gil Gilpin had to operate his own business, or if you were Deputy Sheriff Sid Despain of Baghdad, you were also employed by the mine for law enforcement. So we've been providing law enforcement for the mine in Baghdad since 1945. Sid Despain was there from 1947 to 1984. And so he was able to supplement his income that way.
The other thing that's very interesting to note is that the population of Yavapai County was very consistent for a lot of years. From about the 20s up until about 1970, the population really hovered at about 25,000 people for the entire county. And that meant that the sheriff's office hovered between 11 and 15 deputies at any given time for that entire period.
Wow.
So, I mean, you're talking 1960, you only had 15 deputies for the entire county.
That's amazing.
Right.
Let's take another break. Brendan Fillingham and Ron Williams in studio today with the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. We're talking about the history of the YCSO. Stick around, countywide, back in just a couple minutes.
This is the moment I knew. His future had no boundaries.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.
Don't worry, the 74 people were picked before me in the NFL draft.
To fight childhood obesity, United Way and the NFL are helping kids play at least 60 minutes a day.
Okay, time for the team obstacle course. Yay!
What this place needs is more healthy kids. To get involved or donate, go to unitedway.org/play60.
Now I get it.
Time to wake up.
I've got a job to do today.
I've got a job to do today.
Don't forget, you've got a job to do today.
Hey, Mom. I got the job. Thanks.
Got the job.
Welcome aboard.
Have a good first day at work, Mom.
Your donations to Goodwill fund job training programs right in your community.
Feels good to start fresh, right?
Sure does. And like that, you're a job creator.
Welcome back to Countywide. We have a few minutes left of the program. Brendan, you want to talk jailer, our first jailer.
Right. Our first jailer was Gene Frakes, and he was hired by Sheriff Jim Kramer in 1956. And he was the first full-time jailer. Prior to 1956, the deputy sheriffs would rotate in and out of the jail. But when Gene Frakes came in, he was also, he was a full sworn deputy sheriff, of course, but he was the first full supervisor in the jail also. And he set the standard for Yavapai County jail operations and probably jail operations through the entire region.
What were some of those things that he did? We've got a little bit of time.
Well, jails and detention were very antiquated in the 1950s. What we were doing is basically just holding people. But what he was able to do is he set some safety standards, he set supervision goals.
Safety standards like, for example, all prisons will be searched.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Basic things that you take for granted nowadays that, you know, in the 40s and 50s weren't taken for granted. All prisons will be searched. Prisoners will not smoke in their cells.
Right.
Oh, okay. So some rules started going down.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And regulations such as, you know, when the prisoner comes in, they get searched and they have to shower and they get, you know, prison clothes and they have to, you know, we need to have coverage to maintain the security of this jail. And so he also, you know, supervised the kitchen coming in, and so the prisoners got to eat. And so for many years, that was quite significant. But he, as the chief jailer, as a sergeant, he was also the constable for several years, and he also designed what became the sheriff's office in 1980, where the jail is in Prescott. It's closed now, but he designed that facility.
Oh, wow.
Now, and that's another interesting point about our jails. For the first 100 years, essentially, of the county, the jail was always in the courthouse. The current courthouse, which was built in 1916, the fourth floor was the jail.
Oh, okay.
So the sheriff's office had half of the first floor, and the jail was on the fourth floor. And it was like a 60-bed jail, and that was in operation from 1916 until 1979.
Oh, wow.
Prior to that, the old brick courthouse that you'll see in photos, that courthouse was built in 1879 and was in effect from 1879 to 1915, and that also had the jail in there.
So that's different today, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, very different.
So the jail has always been, you know, part of the sheriff's office. It's always been part of the courthouse until 1980. And
right, and in 1979-80, the Prescott jail was state of the art.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, was renowned throughout the state. But as times changed and riots occurred, in other counties and other states. You know, times had to change with jail construction and design.
Well, I want to thank you both for coming in and giving us just kind of a snapshot of everything. It's been really great. We want to remind everybody it's going to be at the Charlotte Hall Museum in March 2015, and tours at the Sheriff's Office. You give Brendan a call there, he might be able to set something up to give you kind of a tour there too. I'm Paul David, that's today's Countywide, and we'll talk to you again next time.